After the events of Ultima 5, you have been living a peaceful life back on Earth. Over a year has passed since your last adventure in Britannia, and despite having many distractions from the mundane existence, you've dreamt of one day returning and meeting all of the friends who remain in Britannia. A sudden storm appears, and in the circle of stones from whence the portal to Britannia rises, a lightning bolt strikes the ground. Rushing into the storm, you reach the stones and notice something laying in the center of the circle. It is a stone, such as you last saw in the hands of Lord British, that acted as the means of your escape from the underworld and as the tool of Lord Blackthorn's exile. As you pick up the stone, a portal rises in the circle of stones. This time, though, something is very different. Instead of the shimmering blue of the moon gates, this portal glows red. The portal begins to rumble and close, and you dismiss your apprehensions. Hoping to finally see your friends again, you enter the portal. Ultima 6, The False Prophet, released 2 years after Ultima 5, immediately aims to hook you with this cliffhanger. Why is the portal red? Did you end up in Britannia? The only way to find out? Start the game. There are once more 2 ways to begin. For the new player, you can create a character as you've done before. This works basically the same as in the previous 2 games. First, you choose a name and the sex of your character, the latter of which only seems to affect which character portraits you can choose from. Then you enter a scene with the fortune teller, once more as a flashback before the events of Ultima 4, and answer questions about your morality that decides your character class. The scene has been slightly changed to make it visually striking, as this time the game has capacity for more animations and supports a 256 color VGA palette. As such, the fortune teller is now animated and mixes a totally safe drink mixed from liquids that correspond to the virtues, each in the specific color of the virtue. After answering the questions, you drink the liquid and pass out, entering Britannia to begin Ultima 4. Of course, this part is skipped with a few lines of text, basically saying play the previous 2 games if you want to know what happened between this character creation and this game. The second way to create a character is to import your character from Ultima 5. This time, the transfer does not need any external tools to work, even with the GOG versions, but I did notice one interesting thing. If I transferred the entire save folder from Ultima 5 into the DOSBox instance I played Ultima 6 in, the transfer was somehow broken and only let me transfer Maria. But when I used only the saved.gam file, then it worked properly. After having created your character, the introduction sequence begins, unless you already have a character, in which case you'll just end up back in the main menu. This is one of the more tedious parts of the new game engine. If you already have a character, to start a new game it's not enough to just create a character and start the game. Instead, from the menu before you enter the game, you have to go into the settings, set up the graphics and audio of the game, then erase the character information. If you do not do this, the game still allows you to go through the character creation process, only to tell you after the fact that you already have a character and need to remove old data. This could have been significantly improved by having the "Does character already exist?" check before going through the character creation instead of after. After the character creation, you emerge from the Red Moon Gate and find yourself in a moonlit clearing, facing an altar with strange symbols on it. Feeling uneasy, you attempt to leave, but find yourself surrounded by a horde of demonic beings. These giant winged creatures take a hold of you and tie you to the altar. Another being arrives, seemingly a priest of sorts, with a ceremonial knife in one hand and a book in another. Whatever these creatures are, it is clear they intended to kill you. Believing this to be inevitable, you close your eyes. A scream of death accompanies a splatter of blood. Neither of them yours. Another moon gate has risen, and from there your old friends have emerged. The priest beast has been shot, and in the chaos your friends hold the monsters at bay and rescue you from your predicament. As the 4 of you retreat through the moon gate, you also take with you the book the priest was holding. Perhaps it will have answers to explain this predicament you found yourself in. You manage to escape the horde of creatures just before the moon gate closes again and find yourself in the throne room of Lord British. Unfortunately, 3 of these creatures were fast and brave enough to follow you. This thrusts you quickly into what you could call a tutorial fight, during which you will likely be extremely confused, especially if you've never played any of the previous games or spent time reading the manual and getting familiar with all the commands beforehand. There is one negative thing about this introduction segment though. The 256 color VGA graphics support animated introduction segments, and they are nice, but that also means that making them represent player choices would have been a lot more work. And as such, regardless of your character, the animations always represent the avatar as a brown-haired male. Compared to the previous games, some things are familiar. The party window is at the top right, and the moon phases and the approximate time of day display is at the top. The text parser window is at the bottom right. The date has been moved to be with the wind display at the bottom of the game window. Below this is a new feature. The command bar is used to control the game with a mouse and can be used as a replacement to the more traditional keyboard controls, which are also still available. As you fight the 3 creatures, now known to be gargoyles, thanks to the text parser, there are some changes that are evident. First off, the combat scene is playing out in the throne room of Lord British in the game world, instead of being in a separate combat screen. Second, you can now move diagonally, which gives even more freedom to the player movement. And third, by default you only control the avatar, and the rest of the party acts independently. This can be changed though, by examining your characters more closely. By clicking a character in the party window or using one of the function keys, you can enter a more detailed view of the stats of the character. From this screen, you can also view the equipment and the inventory of each character, as once more, each character has their own inventory and their own maximum amount they can equip and carry, both of which are clearly marked in the inventory screen. In the inventory segment, you can also find the combat behavior setting for each character. For the avatar, this setting is locked in the command mode. But for every other character, you can choose whether you want to control them manually or if you want them to act on their own, for which there are several different behavior settings you can choose from. Using these settings, the player can choose for themselves how active of a role they want in the combat segments of the game. After the battle, you can turn off the combat mode, which will allow you to move the entire party at once, regardless of the combat behavior settings. Looting corpses has been revamped quite a bit. In the previous games, you had to wait for a chest to drop, which you could then loot. But now you can use the look command to examine all the corpses for potential loot and equipment. Perhaps the best way to do so is to choose whichever character you want to take things into their inventory and set them into solo mode by pressing the appropriate number button. This sets the rest of the party into a passive mode and allows you to move only the chosen character, preventing the rest of the party from getting in your way or accidentally stumbling into traps or such. As you examine the lootable corpses, they drop all of the items on the ground, which you need to pick up one at a time. If for any reason you don't want to take all of the items and something you want is at the bottom of the pile of lootable objects, you can use the move function to move the object at the top away from the pile without having to pick them up and then later drop them from your inventory. It is also possible to pick up the corpses, which can be useful if a party member dies and you need them resurrected. Or if, for example, someone annoys you enough and you want to shove their dead corpse into somebody's chest as a nice little surprise. The move function can also be used to transfer items between characters, which is a useful feature that helps with managing the carry weights of each character. After indulging in the basic gamer desires of taking everything that's not bolted to the floor, you can talk to Lord British, who is happy to see you again and wishes to tell you everything that has happened since you left Britannia after Ultima 5. But only after introducing you to another new feature, the copy protection system, in which Lord British asks you 3 questions, to which you can find the answer from the compendium that came with the game. If you do not do so, he will just be in a talking loop and will not give you the items needed to enter the world of Britannia properly. After answering the questionnaire correctly, he finally explains to you the current situation. Since your departure, the underworld from whence you rescued Lord British has collapsed. This might sound like a good thing since it was full of dangerous monsters anyway, but That is not the case. Ever since the collapse, gargoyles have been swarming from the dungeons, assaulting the overworld and capturing the shrines of the virtues. The forces of Britannia are barely able to keep these assaults at bay, and your help is needed to resolve this situation, as Lord British's people have been unable to take back the shrines, and you are directed to talk to the captain of the guard, Geoffrey, who led the latest attempt to free the shrines. He directs you to the town of Cove to talk to the soldiers who survived the assault. You can also ask Lord British about the black stone you have, as it is identical to the one he used at the end of Ultima 5. He tells you it is called the Orb of the Moons, and when used correctly, it can open moon gates. To open one of these gates, you merely drop the stone to a location around you, and depending on the relative position between you and the stone, a gate to a specific location will open. Unfortunately, Lord British cannot tell you which positions open gates to which locations, and you must experiment yourself to learn the mysteries of the orb. As he is not trapped within a mirror this time, Lord British also informs you that he returns to his role as a healer for this game, making his castle a good base of operations once more. Other ways to heal also return, including spells, healers in several towns, and camping. Camping works somewhat similarly as previously, and you choose the amount of time to rest and someone to stand on guard in case enemies wander close to ambush the party. To gain benefits from resting, the party members need food in their inventory. This feature retains the use of food in the game while not being a constantly depleting resource that results in almost immediate death. Camping and healers do become somewhat pointless though, as when you learn to use the Orb of the Moons properly, you can just teleport to Lord British for free and full healing whenever you so wish. Next to Lord British is also the Royal Mage Nistel, who informs you that with his magic, he was able to detect the danger you were in, allowing your companions to arrive and rescue you. He also wants to examine the book you took from the gargoyles, and suggests you should go to the Lyceum to find the mage Maria, who might help you with deciphering the mysterious language in which the book has been written. Here, another new feature of the game is shown, where the companions you have with you can sometimes participate in the conversations. With this new feature, your companions will get even more of a personality than they began to get in Ultima 5, and they are now more than just characters to use in combat. During these conversations, the game also introduces a clue highlight feature, where certain keywords are written in a different color from the rest, denoting that these words are very important. Be wary though, as they are not the only useful words to talk to people about. After discussing the situation with Lord British and Nistel, you're free to explore the castle to borrow everything you want, before embarking on the quests you received. After all, Lord British told you can take anything you want, so why wouldn't you? Exploring the castle is a good way to familiarize yourself with a new game engine and some of its new features. For example, some of the old commands have now been combined. For example, the Open command, which is now gone, and is merged with the Use command. Look and Search are both under the same Look command, and so on. This does make the game far easier to learn, as not every action has its own separate command, and the combined commands still make intuitive sense. You can also find books and scrolls that you can now read. The text of these is shown in the text parser window, and also marks the point in the series that makes reading a valuable part of the gameplay experience. For example, in Nistel's room you can ransack his chest, from where you can find a note that directs you to the Serpent's Hold. Of course, not all books are useful or important in any significant way, but act as a way to make the world of Britannia seem just a little bit more alive. From your own room you can find more equipment, food, and your spellbook. From the chest you can also find 2 bags full of magical reagents. These are once more used for spellcasting, but this time you just need to have enough reagents to cast a spell instead of having to mix the spells beforehand. But, unlike the previous 2 games, all spells are not available from the beginning, but you need to learn spells from other people. Most often, this means you need to purchase the knowledge of a spell from someone else, but some spells are only found through a quest, such as the Armageddon spell, which gives you the option to completely exterminate all life in Britannia. Spells are also linked to a specific spellbook, which means each book you find is a valuable asset. The bags are also a new feature which allows you to better manage the inventories of your characters. In Ultima 3, the separate character inventories were a pain to manage, and with the new graphical interface, this could still be extremely annoying. But being able to find containers you can use to organize your inventory makes the inventory management much less annoying. As you exit the castle of Lord British, you're free to explore the rest of the world. This too has seen a rather massive change, as now the world is basically completely open. No more are the castles or towns their own separate maps, but they are part of the world map, and you can move from one place to another seamlessly. The towns of Britain are once more full of different kinds of stores in which you can buy and sell many necessities for your travels. This time the variety of stores has been significantly increased, which from a world-building perspective is a great feature. The interface for buying and selling has remained virtually the same, and all transactions are handled through the dialogue interface. This does have one rather major downside though. Just like in Ultima 3, where each character had their own money and inventory, that applies in Ultima 6 as well, which does add somewhat to the tedium of managing loot. But the big negative is that when selling items, the interface looks at all the applicable gear the character has, which includes everything they have equipped, creating a situation where you can accidentally sell something your character was wearing. Thankfully though, the saving feature has been improved as well. Just as in the previous game, you can save your game basically everywhere, but this time there's also a button combination for loading the game without having to first exit the game. Trying to liberate the nearest shrine will put you against a group of gargoyle warriors defending the shrine, whom can be dispatched with moderate difficulty. Still, this is not enough, and the shrine has been disabled by a magical field. Once more, the runes of the virtues must be found, and the mantras of the virtues learned. Clues for these can be gotten from the leaders of each of the major settlements, and many of them can be considered a small quest. These quests tend to make the player get more familiar with the inhabitants of each settlement, while also being thematically linked to the virtue the settlement represents. For example, gaining the Rune of Humility requires you to find the most humble inhabitant of New Bergensia, which leads you to talk to the people to learn more about them to find the person you're looking for. You can also learn the mantras by talking to the people in the settlements, but this part you can skip if you already know the mantras from the previous games. This is one of the features of the series I find fantastic. Much of the games is about knowledge. If you already have the information you need, you can skip what in the first playthrough is the vast majority of the game. This to me shows how well the worlds of the games have been built. All of the runes, for example, are where they are from the very beginning, and often actually getting those runes is the easy part, as they are usually just lying around somewhere. But the real journey is not the getting of the rune, it's learning more about the world so you know where to look. Finding one of the runes also introduces another feature, and one of my favorite companions in the entire series. The Rune of Valor has been taken away by a rat into a small hole, and somehow you must recover it. Unfortunately, humans are just too large to fit into a small hole. Thankfully though, in the castle of Lord British there is a helpful talking mouse called Sherry, who can be used in solo mode to enter places where your human companions cannot go, as she fits into mouse holes and through the bars of gates, allowing for creative approaches to some problems you may face in your travels. Liberating the shrines is not only an important part in defeating the onslaught of the gargoyle menace, but serves as a very important function in the game. Just as in Ultima 5, character attributes are linked to the virtues, and increasing those attributes is done by meditating at a shrine when a character has accumulated enough experience to level up. This also allows the player to strategize how to improve the available party members. Sure, a spellcaster would definitely benefit from intelligence, but perhaps strength would be more useful to carry more equipment, or dexterity to be able to use non-spell ranged weapons more effectively. Experience gain works identically to the previous game, where only the character that strikes the final blow to an enemy gains experience, requiring some creative fighting to somewhat evenly level up the party. Dying as well is similar to Ultima 5. Upon death of the Avatar, the party is resurrected at the castle of Lord British, with a hefty experience point penalty dependent on the karma of your party. This makes death a significant obstacle, and it's instead recommended to save often rather than risk death. Liberating a shrine also lets you take the stones used to magically seal the shrines. These are moonstones, which are the focus of the moon gates. Each moonstone correlates to a phase of the moon during which the gate linked to the stone opens. This also explains why the moon gates are not where they used to be, because the stones required for their operation were taken by the gargoyles, so they can use their magic for their own purposes. This does allow the player to create their own fast travel points by burying the stones themselves in locations they'd like to revisit later, without having to travel across the world by more traditional means. Beware though, since moonstones can only be recovered when neither of the moons is visible in the sky. After having liberated the shrines, it is time to follow up on the second line of investigation given to you at the very beginning, learning more about the book your party took from the gargoyles. In Lyceum, you find out that the book cannot be translated without a silver tablet containing the necessary information to read the language within. Unfortunately, the tablet was broken in half by a band of pirates, and a large portion of the tablet is missing. This takes the party on a treasure hunt around the world, looking for pieces of a map that shows the location of the other part of the tablet. Traveling across the world requires the player to once more sail on a ship to reach places outside the Moongate network. To use a ship, the party needs to purchase the deed to one first, as stealing ships is not possible. Sailing is basically the same as moving on foot, and the wind system doesn't seem to affect sailing in any significant way anymore. Horses are also available for purchase, but as in the previous games, I've found little practical use for them and merely find them a curiosity. There are also rafts and skiffs. These work almost identically to their predecessor, but another quite brilliant feature has been added to them. As long as a character has enough weight free in their inventory, they can just pick up a skiff and carry it in their inventory, so they can be used to pass obstacles not only in the overworld, but in the peril-filled dungeons of Britannia. And the player needs to explore these dungeons once more, as some of the map pieces can only be found deep within these locations. The dungeons as well have now changed massively from all of the previous games, as the first-person dungeon crawling is now gone. Instead, they are also played out in the same view as the rest of the game. This does allow the dungeons to be more complex, as the first-person exploration was based on a very strict grid system with relatively little variability, with the exception of encounter rooms that were played in the combat interface, where the rooms could be quite detailed with puzzles and environmental details. After finding the map pieces, you still need to read the map. And this, I think, was cleverly done, as it uses the new engine of the game well to its advantage. You need to place the map pieces on the ground in order, lining up the sprites on the map pieces, all of which combine to a map that shows the location of the missing half of the silver tablet. Now, with the ability to translate the book taken from the gargoyles, you find out what the contents say. And this, to me, was one of the best parts of the entire Ultima series. The book contains the prophecies of the gargoyles that tell of the extinction of their entire species. When all three of the prophecies are fulfilled, the gargoyles will be no more. First prophecy tells of a false prophet who desecrates the holy temple of the gargoyles and steals the sacred book within, the Codex of Ultimate Wisdom. The second prophecy tells of the return of the false prophet into the underworld. This return marks the time when the underworld begins to collapse, and a time of famine and hardship begins. The third prophecy tells of the false prophet returning once more, this time wiping out what remains of the gargoyles, a fate which can only be averted by the sacrifice of the false prophet. Finding out that all of the deeds you've done since Ultima 4 were not as good as you were led to believe, but instead, as you were trying to do good for the people living on the surface, you were causing massive harm for a civilization you didn't even know existed. It's one of the brilliant storytelling twists of the Ultima series. Now, the gargoyles are fighting for their survival, trying to prevent you from bringing the final prophecy about, which would destroy their entire race, and Lord British wants you to do so, actively trying to get you to commit actions that would doom a civilization to extinction. Knowing what you know, the Avatar would not knowingly destroy a race of sentient beings if any other options are available. Therefore, only one option remains: to try and broker peace with the gargoyles, ending the conflict, preventing the final prophecy from being fulfilled, and save two worlds at once, with or without help from Lord British. Once more meeting Sinvral, a gargoyle living on the surface whose help was useful in the previous game, you find your way into the gargoyle home and learn some of their language, allowing you to communicate with those living underground in the last remaining city of the gargoyles. Since you are seen as the false prophet, a harbinger of doom, the gargoyles are understandably suspicious of your motives, but decide to give you a chance as you make a pact with them. If you fail, you will submit to the ritual of sacrifice willingly. Unfortunately, neither side of this conflict is willing to let the other possess the Codex of Ultimate Wisdom, and the situation seems unlikely to be resolved without more bloodshed. However, there is a possibility, one which is not what either of the sides truly desires, but if neither side is willing to compromise, someone has to step in and seize the slaughter. The Codex of Ultimate Wisdom was originally located in the Void, another dimension that is not well understood. If the gargoyles were able to once pull the Codex out from the Void, it only makes sense that the Codex could also be sent back. With the help of a gargoyle scholar, you find out all that is needed to conduct the ritual to send the Codex back, and create a situation that would force coexistence of the humans and the gargoyles. The ritual requires multiple things such as the Vortex Cube, which has gone missing, all of the moonstones that were used to seal the shrines, 2 magical lenses, one of the gargoyles and one of the humans, and of course the Codex itself. As before, the Codex can only be reached by someone who is on a spiritual journey, so the next step is to ensure that this is the case by visiting the Temple of Singularity, a gargoyle temple reachable only by those who can fly. This part of the game shows off even more of the interactivity and the extensive use of props in the new engine. You're required to find out how to construct a hot air balloon, which uses several mundane objects you've seen all over the world, without even thinking about them as anything but fluff. But now, even those fluff items have an actual use. Reaching the shrine, you receive your sacred quest, and you need to learn more about the value system of the gargoyles, who also follow a set of virtues and principles, but one's very different from ones you've learned. As the Codex teach those who read it what they need to know, different civilizations in different situations will need different teachings to survive and prosper. A great example of this are the statues within the gargoyle shrines, as they depict the 3 villains from the first Ultima trilogy. To you, these characters were evil, causing death and destruction for their own benefit, but the traits that made them do so are also traits that form the central value system of the gargoyles. During your conversations with the spirits of the Triad of Evil, now trapped in the statues, you find out that each of them embodied their respective gargoyle principle, but just like Blackthorn, lost sight of the true meaning of the principles. These conversations have a unifying theme to them, as each of the Triad of Evil have now learned what their mistake was, and as such they remain as teachers of the true way of the gargoyle principles, having not only the knowledge of the principle, but experience of where the misinterpretation of them can lead one astray, showing the player that from failure can come greater understanding and purpose. Journeying around the world again, collecting everything you need and completing the ritual, the Codex is sent back into the Void. Unsurprisingly, Lord British is not that pleased with what you've done. After all, you just sent the most sacred of all books into another dimension. But eventually, he is able to see the wisdom in your deed, as now with the Codex back in the Void, the only way to read the book is via cooperation, while using the magical lenses crafted for this purpose, one lens to be used by the humans and one by the gargoyles. This may not be the kind of peace that's brought by diplomacy, but instead by necessity, and as both sides were unable to compromise on this matter, the options were between an uneasy peace of necessity and a bloody war that would likely end up in the total destruction of an entire society, and as the Avatar, the latter was never an option. In my opinion, Ultima 6 is one of the best role-playing games ever made. Not only is the new game engine quite phenomenal, especially for the age, capable of showing the player an extremely detailed world full of characters who go about their business on a schedule, with an immense amount of objects that can be moved or otherwise interacted with. Often just for visual detail, but still a part of the world instead of being just a static, unmovable prop. But the story is a masterpiece as well, playing with the expectations of the player and the tropes of role-playing games. The twist about the gargoyles and the recontextualization of the previous games was fantastically done. Having played through many adventures as the Avatar, having done so much good, and now finding out that all of the cataclysms and issues you've already known about tangentially, as they only moderately inconvenienced the human society on the surface, were causing massive extinction-scale events, harming another society you've encountered in battle before, but never even knew they were a society, just brushing them off as demons. For the first time as well, the IBM PC version of the game supports the usage of a sound card, allowing the players of those versions to hear the fantastic music made for the Ultima games. There is a downside to this though, at least on the IBM PC version, as there doesn't seem to be proper dynamic music system, which does create some extremely awkward situations where the music and the actual situation don't really match. Still, actually having audio that's more than the PC speaker making noises is a massive improvement in and of itself. Anyway, that is it for Ultima 6, one of my favorite games of all time. I would also like to apologize that this video took so long to make. I've been quite ill for the last month, and I also managed to screw up my recording settings, requiring me to delete all of the video material I had and restart the game. Still, thank you so much for watching. Thank you everyone who's been supporting this creative journey on Ko-fi and on YouTube, and thank you everyone who's been popping in on the Twitch streams. That is it for this time, and I hope to see you next time when we tackle more of the world of Britannia in Ultima 7, The Black Gate. Until then, Fintrovert, signing out.